Greetings, my friends. This is Maerlande. I'm continuing with the showcase for Warhammer Dark Elves, and I have a special guest. Sombre is here. We're going to continue. Go ahead and say hello.
Hey guys.
So we're going to continue the game I was playing with, and Sombre's going to give some insight and comments, and we'll just see how it develops.
I can answer any questions about how mechanics work and so on.
So we are on turn 23. You can see I've got a fort going up here in Enkirna. I'm going to kind of guess at a sort of Turkish pronunciation. And I got another fort already built and upgraded once. I don't know if we get a second upgrade. It looks like yes. So we can upgrade 3 levels to 3 full levels. That's one of the first.
There should just be standard forts for Middle Era, I think.
I started with the Palisades, so that's a very crappy fort.
Yeah. Well, I think that's normal in Middle Era. The first thing you build is Palisade, but
for most, I think. So we are going to get a 3 level, like it's going to upgrade, because I can see right now it's got the 4 towers rather than the single central tower.
Yeah. And so they can't reach 3 command points, but they can get wall strength.
Yeah, they can get up to the 500 wall strength and the better admin. And this one I'll upgrade. And then we can, I believe I now have, I brought the first of the pleasure cultists over here where my candles are low. And I was going to have her do a search. This lady's finished searching, although she could pop up here and orders should be on retreat for her. Sorry, there we go. Yeah, orders on retreat, good. I don't know what I'm going to do with this scout. Set him on retreat, probably.
So what have you been finding is useful in expansion? I noticed that, we talked about this earlier, that with the Witch Elves, the attrition's pretty high on them. If they take any missile fire, they go down quick.
Yeah, they did not turn out to be a great choice for expansion. The gold to effectiveness ratio wasn't all that satisfactory. They're not outrageously expensive, and they're better with some death skills, which I grabbed. But overall, any of the basic dread spears or the dark riders, the dark shards, they do fine. The dark shards are maybe a little underwhelming because it's a smaller crossbow but shoots faster, but they still are helpful. And then once I got to a little bit higher resources versus gold, I went for some of the bleak swords. But very, very comparable between the dread spear and the bleak sword. The bleak sword just hits a little harder but shorter length. And they're more than adequate along with the slaves.
Yeah. Quite similar kind of stats-wise to, I think in Dominions the closest thing would be like the Fearbolg.
Yes,
I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but...
Yeah, Fearbolg. And I agree, they're a bit above average, but they have the lower hit points. So
yeah, which is really, 8 is very low.
It is.
They're much more likely to take afflictions, probably.
Yeah, they're a one-shot kill kind of thing. But they're a basic medium infantry. Protection 10 is average. But what they do have is excellent attack and defense. And that's very useful. And then on the crossbows, nice high precision. So that's helpful. So I find them quite economical. 15 gold is a little on the high side for a human-sized infantry, but with the better stats, it's worthwhile. And I haven't had these guys, the Dark Shards, end up in melee very often. But if they do, they fight fine.
Yeah, they seem like they would be kind of light infantry kind of levels of survivability. They don't hit very hard, obviously. But,
well, not bad. Like 15 damage is not shabby.
Yeah, and it's 50% pierce, isn't it, as well? Alternates or randomly between pierce and slash.
Well,
Yeah.
they remind me of Almish Rangers with the axe. Relatively lightly armored, but if they get in melee, they're not stuck with a crappy dagger.
Yeah. The dagger's the kind of classic holdout terrible weapon.
Right.
Because the length is a big problem for that, isn't it? You'll often just get repelled anyway.
I have not particularly used any of the others because I am mostly gold constrained, and I haven't needed the extra killing power of, say, these guys are, again, no shield, so they're going to kill faster, but then for roughly the same gold, because I'm at 21, the Witch Elves also have the ability to do 2-weapon fighting. I have definitely not used any of the cavalry, simply because the way the mechanic works with the slaves, it felt to be better to use larger armies of cheaper troops to keep your numbers up.
I can see you've got now in your capital, you've got pretty high resources.
I do.
That's one of the things I was going for with the enslavement event, is to enable a kind of concentration of resources as you expand into the capital.
Yeah, and I got to jump to my notes here because I am keeping notes, and we are at 624. So episode 5 with Sombre. I'm going to note that roughly at 0624, I ask you about the enslavement resources. So those are permanent?
They are, yeah. So it's much like there's some events in the game that will give you a permanent resource boost in a particular province, and they can be really great. I think you get them with order production quite often, but often you'll get them in a province where it's not hugely beneficial to have that, and it's really nice when it happens in a fort.
Well,
the enslavement event, you always get the resources in the fort.
Okay, great. Well, in hindsight, given that, I think I would have taken some sloth. When I first made the pretender, I wasn't sure at all. The only thing I could really see is that there was advantages to some death scales, and obviously you wanted a lot of gold. That was blatant. Expensive magi. But going some sloth and swapping it for some growth might have been a good call, because I now cannot use my resources. I just can't. There's no. You didn't make any high resource, low gold troops. I think at best they're 1-to-1.
Yeah, I think there isn't really what I would consider kind of a classic resource sink.
No, these executioners are the highest ratio resource to gold.
Yeah, they're the closest, and they are pretty great. But they do have, so their problem is really they're unshielded. Their armor's pretty good, but they also, their version of the greatsword is a bit less defensive. I think you get a defense 2 from the standard greatsword, and their one switches it around to be more attack oriented.
Right. But none of that's a problem, because using a greatsword in the game, there's a purpose to them, there's a use to them. 16 protection is solid, but you do have, if you really need protection, you've got the Cold One Dread Knights here, but they're very expensive, and I can see using
very high recruitment points. I ended up getting constrained on recruitment points quite a lot trying to get the cavalry.
I could see that. I could definitely see that. So, so most of my just expansion, I lost an army last episode. Does it show here? No. I had an army, well, more or less it was kind of a mutual destruction here against Nabaa. The AI is doing the funniest thing. It's taking one province and then patrolling a turn and then taking another. And I don't think I've ever seen the AI do that.
That's interesting you say that. So I did have a problem with an earlier version of this mod that I thought that I'd solved. So there's some tricks you can use in modding where you spawn invisible units to kind of act as markers to set various events off. And unfortunately, the AI in Dominions is able to cheat and see units no matter how stealthy they are.
Yes.
And if it knows that there's a stealthy unit somewhere, it provokes it into patrolling quite aggressively.
Then that's why.
But maybe It may be. I'm not certain. Because I thought I had fixed that by the units. They appear and immediately expire, so they're not. They don't last for any length of time at all. Scouts and
Okay.
things do, but
Hmm.
and I think that it's okay. But having seen you having some kind of issues with the AI behavior, for you it seems to be different from normal, and I'd like to avoid making the AI, go loopy. So I'm
Well,
going to investigate that.
yeah, because it sure seems to slow it down expanding, because instead of taking its nice big stacks and going province to province, it stops and patrols a turn. And it did it in this province here in 4, again in 8, and also Jotun did it. So I've lost quite a lot of scouts to unexpected patrols by expansion armies. And the man army here did it as well. So I've seen that happen 5 or 6 times.
So it's interesting. That definitely suggests that they are doing that. And so when I was having these problems when I was developing the mod, it was getting to the point that the expansion was really dreadful from the AI. I did a quick comparison with no mods on, and then with this early version of the mod on, and it kind of cut the expansions like a fifth of the speed. It just completely ruined the AI's expansion. I don't think that's happened here. They have expanded, but
Well,
maybe it's slower than they usually would. I don't know. I
but
mean, they are
Jotun
only
did
on normal.
Jotun did a terrible job.
Yeah.
If you look here, I mean, he went
I
nowhere
think
there. He utterly failed. Go ahead.
A thing that I aim for is for the mods to all work nicely with the AI, and so I'm definitely going to investigate that. And I think what I'll do is I'll just run a series of tests of seeing how the AI expands with and without the mod turned on.
Okay. Have a look at it.
Yeah.
I don't personally care a lot because I almost never play with AIs, except just for testing. But I know that a lot of people that are going to be interested in this nation or any of your nations are going to want to play some single player. So
yeah, they're kind of the hidden majority in a way, and apparently most people who are playing Dominions, not playing it a lot, and perhaps not going on the forums and discords and things, but they're playing it single player mostly.
Totally. Well, I can share with you some numbers I do know. Dominions 5 has sold well over 100,000 copies. You can dig that up on Steam Spy. And if we add up all the people on all the discords, I think we've got about 5,000 total, but there's a lot of duplicates, so it could be as low as 3,000. So that is our active multiplayer base, effectively. And that's even including the Something Awful people on the Ruby Discord and, the communities that don't mingle as much as some of the others.
Yeah, so and there's probably some other kind of enclaves of multiplayer people who are playing it with their friends. I've heard some people, they'll play 3-player games over and over again.
Sure. But, well, there's also some national. There's some national communities that are language based. Like I know of the big Italian one, and there's a big Russian one, and there's a good sized Finnish one. And of course, I don't go there because
a Chinese one as well.
Yeah. So those could add up. But even so, I would say that we're looking at maybe only as much as maybe 10% of the community plays some multiplayer. The 10% of the people who have bought the game.
Yeah.
And then if you
look at that's a little different from the number of active players, isn't it?
It is, but you can look at the number of, you can actually look, there's a place, Steam Spire on Steam, where you can look up how many active instances are playing daily. And it's larger than the multiplayer community would indicate.
Yeah.
So my bet would be for every 10 people who play the game, one of them is a multiplayer activist. That's
it's interesting, and that's what I kind of assumed. I hadn't really looked at the numbers for it, but I actually do play a little bit of single player. I don't play a huge amount, but of course when I'm testing mods, I'll play in single player, and I actually play a little bit of co-op as well with some friends.
Co-op is neat.
Play against AI.
Although somebody brought up, and I think they're right, I think I like co-op in Conquest of Elysium better.
I mean that is a more geared towards obviously single player in the first place, and less being a competitive game. So it's kind of natural the co-op. That would be more fun.
Well, as somebody commented, because the game's mechanics are fundamentally quite a bit simpler, the AI is a significant challenge without having to crank it way up. I mean, I struggle at even the lower level AIs. So, that's kind of a good thing. But back, I guess, to the mod. So that was a good discussion. I made a timestamp note about the AI patrolling. So that's a bit of an oddity that hopefully you can find an alternate method.
It's possible, or I may end up making here's a version you can use if you want to play with the AI, and here's a version for multiplayer, because there's some things that are just impossible to do without using these kind of invisible marker units.
Good. So I got my first Corsair Cove last episode, and I made a text note during the video and highlighted it. So here it is. Of course, as you said, it's an invisible bit of money, but it is coming, and it's in that, you said 30 to 45 or 20 to 45 gold per turn.
I think it's set to 30 gold, but then the command that it uses has a 50% variation either direction, so it's 15 to 45.
15 to 45. Yeah, but that's a nice steady bit of increase, and the Corsair captains are good commanders.
I mean, just having sailing is huge.
Absolutely, and Tax Collector has its potential, and a Taskmaster.
So the concept with those was that you'd be able to take effectively sailor raiders. So you can hit enemy provinces if you're in a war, or if you're able to reach them and they're not able to reach you. You can nip in, do a little bit of take the province for a couple of turns, and then you'll have to run away probably. But having taken it, you're a tax collector, so you've grabbed the gold while you're there. And hopefully you leave behind a Corsair Cove. That can be very useful, because then when the enemy retakes it, it still is causing them unrest, and if you retake the province, you get the gold from the Corsair Cove again.
Ah, nice. I didn't notice that feature. One thing I really liked about your design here, I enjoyed the Sea Dragon Cloak concept. So it's effectively a shield, and it parries. And I believe all the Corsairs have it, including the troops, right?
They do, and it's very similar to the hide shield, I think. So it's not a huge amount of extra protection. So but if you're making your shield defense roll, you're ending up on 11 and then 9 protection. So I think it just adds, so 20 protection is still pretty amazing.
Well, and reducing missile attrition or chipping damage from missiles is useful.
Especially particularly if you have 8 hit points.
Right, and especially with something like what I call a Ginsu knife, any of the Ginsu knife type troops. One of the disadvantages of them is always, if they're shot at a lot, you tend to lose a lot on the way, because they do have to vote.
I would recommend playing a bit with the Corsairs as troops, because I found that, so when I was kind of initially designing them, I thought, okay, well, they're for a specific thing here. They are ambidextrous, as you say, like the Ginsu knife. It chops up kind of weaker troops. Or you can use it to get around high defense. If the enemy has high defense infantry, for instance, you can get around that. But I found that actually surprisingly survivable. They can do pretty well because of the cloak, despite their armor not being terribly heavy.
If we look at them compared to the Dread Spears, that's 3 or 4 more defense. So that's significant. That could be worth the 5 more gold. Because we're looking, these are 20 in the Dreads. So you could maybe do different than I did and use them for expansion instead of the Dread Spears.
Because I like to play with a little bit of theme, I tend to put, when I'm making raiding parties, I tend to put them with the Corsair captains. I have a Corsair captain kind of moving around with a small group of them. Of course, then you don't get the enslavement events if you don't have enough troops moving around.
Yeah, but most of the time I've been pumping up my numbers to get the enslavement troops with just the slaves.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the concepts I wanted to push, is that it feeds into itself. You can put your slaves at the back of your battle line so you don't end up losing them all, and they just make up the numbers.
Well, I tended to just throw them right in there.
Chuck them at the front.
Well, there were so darn many of them.
Yeah, as long as you've got enough, it's fine. Just chuck them in there. They didn't cost you anything.
And as I was kind of mentioning, there's some nice supplemental features of the Corsair captains. You know, both inspirational and the Taskmaster, and then sailing. You know, tax collector. That's nifty for a possible sailing raider. Quite useful. So definitely something that I will look into trying now. So
I think there are also coastal recruit Corsairs.
well, you've got a lot of foreign recruit type of options. You don't. You don't get the commander, but you definitely get the Corsairs, and you also get the Shades, which at the moment I haven't had a reason to go for stealthy troops.
Yeah, obviously against the AI, it's a lot less interesting to take stealthy troops because they can see them, so they'll patrol them out. But also, you don't have that kind of psychological warfare of I've taken 6 of your provinces in one go. You know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and the other issue is that because the AIs didn't do a very good job, I've had a long extended expansion phase. Because it's turned 23 and I've still got lots of places to take independence. I finally reached my limits basically down here. Ind finally blocked me off and Man blocked me off. But I've still got all this stuff to my northwest.
Do you have the score graphs turned on?
I should have, yeah. I turned them on because it's testing. So I'm big, you know, pretty darn big.
So here, you can see a total failure from the expansion of Jotun, as you were saying. And
Jotun and Ind.
The bar as well as that.
Yeah, and Bandar did very poorly.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if the mod is affecting that. Because Jotun's normally quite reliable at expanding under the AI.
Well, look at it this way. The ones I got to first, that I met up earliest, are the ones that have the problem. So
I suppose
I didn't find Man or Flagra, most of their directions very quickly, but I got to the borders of Jotun and the borders of Bandar very early. So that could very well be, because Bandar sat with a big army here for ages, and then Jotun had a big army of these Moose Knights flopping back and forth between these two provinces, doing nothing else. It just kind of kept moving. This large army of Moose Riders and stuff just sort of meandered back and forth between this province 39 and this province 30.
There's some of that it may be influenced by the scouts you're using as well, because again, the AI can see the scouts and gets obsessive about trying to patrol them out.
Well, I've been. That was the side of the map I was using the assassination expansion.
Right.
So those are assassins. So that might be because he can see those. He's freaking out about it. The AI is.
It's definitely something I'll investigate, because I don't want to interfere with people's. You know, the worst thing you can do with a mod is if somebody's got it on and they're doing something unrelated and it's interfering with it and they don't realize.
Yeah, but it is not your fault that Illwinter gave the AI the cheating ability to see exact PD and exact troop formations.
I was surprised when I found it out, honestly.
The first person that told me that was Executor 13 years ago.
Yeah.
Because he told me that the AI can see PD in factors of 11s. Not 11s, but the first number after.
10 plus 1, isn't it?
10 plus 1. And so that's why I mentioned in this that if you're working against AIs, 11 PD is kind of the magic number.
So that's kind of also a useful tip for people who want a more challenging game against the AIs. You can either manage the AIs, make your life a bit easier by exploiting that to some extent, or you can be aware of it and avoid doing it because it makes the AIs a bit more passive.
On the other hand, there's other very good reasons. It turns out that a number of bad events are triggered by 10 or less PD.
Yep.
So if you go for 11, it's just that little bit more gold to avoid some fairly crappy events.
11's a good magic number, and 6 is a good magic number.
Those are my favorites, 6 and 11. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've had a nice little chat about the Corsairs, and I'll I haven't decided if I want to keep going with this game or back away, move on to another mod for a bit. Maybe let this gel in people's minds. And I would sort of like to move on to a different Pretender design. I've got some more ideas on that. But on the other hand, I'm still learning a bunch of things in this playthrough. I definitely want, I've now seen the Corsair Cult, or the Corsair Cove generate. I'd like to see a Pleasure Cult generate and get a bit of feel for that.
Well, we could kind of hurry along with the game by just throwing some province defense on the borders and going through some turns quite quickly to just have a look. Not playing optimally, to just have a look at some things.
Yeah, we sure could.
So the mechanics for the Pleasure Cult, the way that works, I think you mentioned before, is if you have a fort, and there's a chance the Pleasure Cult will start to emerge in it. And the way that, by start to emerge, I mean it gets a particular site that appears, and then over time there's a chance that site upgrades to the next level, and then the next level as the cult grows. And there's kind of a long chain of events that will happen. But it's dependent on the dominion, either yours or somebody else's, being low. So,
it needs to be low dominion, period. It doesn't matter whose it is.
Yeah.
Oh, so I thought it was that yours had to be low.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of racking my brains to think exactly how this works. I think that it's very slightly more oppressive to the cult to have your dominion be high there than someone else's. But it's quite similar. But of course, you've got heretics who knock down your dominion or anyone else's. They just move it towards neutral.
Yeah, the pleasure cultists themselves are heretics.
And independently of that, they also have a chance independently of that of influencing some of the events to make it more likely that the cult appears, upgrades, and so on.
So, I don't know how many spoilers you want to give away, but are there a lot of levels of pleasure cult upgrade?
There are. So there's the kind of very first emergence of it, which doesn't do very much at all. Then there's the cult becomes more established, and you can recruit some cult-specific units.
Okay.
It starts to have an effect on your sloth scale as well in that province. It becomes more slothful because everyone's indulging in things.
And that might, I don't know if that's Jotun Sloth. No, that's Jotun Sloth there. See, this was...
You would get an event if once the cult starts. It will. Okay. The very first site doesn't give you an event because it happens. It kind of flicks on and off quite a lot as they're struggling to get a foothold. But then, as soon as it gets established, you start to get messages about it.
Another thing I noted about using the Witch Elves, it's not really to your advantage to buy many priests early, because this is really, I think, the only really good priest, and I don't find her to be something I would really want in the early game for much else than Blessing. And that's a fairly expensive Bless chassis.
She's a good blood hunter because she's got Dowsing 1.
Oh, absolutely. But I'm not ready. I generally nowadays in Dominions 5 don't start a blood economy till expansion's over. There's just too many other important things going on.
I think that's particularly true for Dark Elves as well, because from what I recall, you get 2 blood slave capital income, so you've already got the trickle of blood that you need for certain things. So you're not really going to be desperate for like the small amount of blood that you would get from getting blood going early on.
That's right. Well, and I usually wait until construction 4 to make sanguine dowsing rods before I try very hard. And this is wonderful that you get that trickle of slaves so that you can make your first sanguine dowsing rods, get that started. Plus, you also kind of want to establish where you're going to set your blood hunting provinces and secure them with PD and or patrols before there's a chance of too much crap happening to them. And,
absolutely.
So, with the various general nerfs towards blood magic between Dominions 3, then to 4, then to 5, and I used to think they weren't good, but now I think they're actually pretty good because it's still very powerful, and it's my estimate it's about 40% of what it used to be, but that also means you want to be more careful with it.
Yeah, yeah. It was very in 3. I remember like some of the very strongest plays that I ever saw was people switching 100% to blood, and there was a spate. You know, the meta game is very dependent on kind of people seeing one person do something and then they try it out for themselves.
Of
So you get this
course.
kind of like brief fads in the meta game of everything
Yeah.
shifting. And there was a fad at one point for winning with a blood sacrifice rush,
Yes.
which is get the Jade Knife, or yeah, I think it's the
Yeah.
Jade Knife, isn't it? And
Yeah.
get your ability to blood
Yeah.
sacrifice up with a certain nation, and you could literally cover the entire map in your candles and kill everyone on
Yes.
kind of turn 40. It was absurd.
And that's more or less impossible now because they made significant changes to the way candles propagate.
Yep.
And that makes Dominion 5 and Dominion 6 much more viable than they used to be. And you very rarely see like Dominion 9 or 10 on a Pretender because that no longer gives awe.
Yeah, that was a big reason people used to take it on
Definitely.
the classic Dom 9 worm and things like that.
Exactly. So, okay, good. So there was a little discussion of the pleasure cult. Now, I didn't have a whole heck of a lot of other obvious questions. It's fairly obvious to me here that if I want to keep these candles fairly low, I don't really want to keep my profit there. But
Yeah, it's very very counter to trying to set up the pleasure cult having the profit there, because he's an automatic spread per turn, isn't he?
Exactly. Yeah, quite significant. If we look here under temples, the profit is he's 1. I wonder what the unit or item that's giving the
That's
other one is.
Helibron.
Oh yes, of course. Right, the hero. She's kind of cool.
So
That
the kind of I love her sprite. I'm so happy with how that turned out.
Yeah.
Looks like a heavy metal album cover from kind of the 80s.
It sure does. Yeah, it looks like Twisted Sister from here in Canada. They were men, but that's how they dressed. And Dee Snider had hair just about exactly like that. I was just watching the other day.
Exploding out.
Yeah. Just watching the old video that I grew up with from him the other day. It just popped up on my YouTube. And yes, she looks very much like Dee Snider from 1985 with, can't remember, Don't You Want to Rock or whatever that song they did was. It was one of those absolutely cheesy but hilarious rock anthems, like the classic Kiss one or AC/DC's anthem for rock and roll.
Yeah. It's very much a part of the kind of Warhammer aesthetic, because it was it's these guys from Nottingham in the 1980s, and they're into their kind of death metal, and well, not death metal at that point, but you know,
right. No, glam metal. That's what we'd call it.
Yeah, kind of in tail end of glam, in Britain.
Yeah, we called it glam metal, like the guys that all wore huge amounts of makeup and androgynous clothing and stuff like that.
Absolutely, yeah. Some people nowadays might call it cock rock, I think.
Yeah. Well, there was a couple of them that were women. I mean, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts kind of almost fits in that group. She was more garage band, but anyways, we're meandering. But I've had a number of comments that people enjoy when I meander on the tournament cast, because I meander into historical anecdotes or funny stories from the old days of Dominions.
A little bit of color, I think, is good.
I think so.
You need a play-by-play guy telling you technically what's going on. You need a bit of color too.
Yeah, and I have to say, I am really enjoying any of these co-casts or broadcasts with guests, because it's a lot easier to keep the conversation moving. Monologuing is not the easiest thing.
It's really hard, and this has more of a kind of a podcast feel, which I think is. I don't know if people are going to do it with your videos, but a lot of people, the audio part of the video is more important to them than the kind of visual part of it. A lot of them will be kind of doing something else at the same time.
Oh, I've heard that from many of them, because there's not that much action in a Dominions game. You know, trying to keep the video interesting is a bit of effort, because other than watching a battle, there's a lot of just, okay, you're checking out this province, you're checking out that one.
Yeah,
but
so
I like
Helibron.
One thing I spent quite a bit of time on last episode was saying, look, this is a nation where you're going to have to read your flavor text.
You do with Elebron
Yes.
for sure.
Yes,
There's a very
absolutely.
important thing, two important things right at the end of that description.
3 of them. Her weapons,
Hmm.
the amulet that you don't see, how those weapons work, and the automatic anti-magic.
And
Now,
she can't use magic in battle. She can use priest
yes.
levels, but she can't cast blood in battle.
I missed that. So there
It's
you go.
forbidden by her god. They don't use battle magic.
And I found this. No, that wasn't the one. What was the special ability she? No, I guess that was it. Dominion Spreader. So that's useful. Anyways,
Yeah, so I
that's a
think
nice hero.
the idea with her, and I think you can do this with the because she's really a souped-up version of the Death Hag,
Mhm.
as many heroes tend to be. I think that they are thuggable because Hellebrand doesn't have Awe, but the Death Hags do. They have Fear and Awe, which is a very
Mhm.
nice combination. They're complementary.
How many hit points do the Death Hags have?
They have, I think,
14. 14.
yeah,
That's
it's
for a
not. It's
human
for a dark
sized
elf.
for a human sized
It's
thug.
good.
That's quite good.
Yeah, so I think the thing that they're really missing is protection,
Mhm.
because things will slip through the fear and the awe. So you can find some affordable armor that makes sense to put on them. I think.
Mhm.
I think that's a possibility. Although, of course, they don't have good head protection. So we're talking about body armor and head armor, and you're getting a little bit expensive there for a
But
light thug.
yeah, but for a counter thug, 2
Yes.
16 attack, 16 damage with the secondary damage source Ginsu's. That's a hard hitting counter thug. If you can bump up the
Yeah.
protection and maybe give her something like you've got air magic, you could give her a dancing trident, or if you luck out
Um,
with air earth, a stone bird or something, um, and then some armor. Yeah.
and unlike the witch elves, I'm pretty certain they don't berserk, and they're blessed. So you can
Okay.
get in a few different things, but they do have berserk, which obviously works better if you've got some armor on. But
120 gold for a human size thug is not too shabby. And of course, anytime you can stack fear auras, that's very significant.
yeah,
All right.
so hopefully they're useful. A thing that I'm aiming for in the mods, particularly because I end up making a lot of units. You can see here there are not many Dominions nations that have this kind of assortment of things. There's some that have a huge amount of summons, like the Russian nations have like a great long list of summons,
but you don't have any junk units. When I went
that's
through
what I'm
this
going
list,
for. Yeah,
you don't have any junk units. You've got some specialty units, but these are obviously, these Sisters of Slaughters obviously have a very particular use. Now, the Barbed Wit, double attacks, extra for shields. So these are potentially things to start chewing up Almish tower shields.
you would be amazed with the Sisters of Slaughter. The thing that's really shocking to me, and I factored in a little bit when I was doing, but I was surprised how effective it is that they're so good at repelling that they really do a significant amount of the attacks coming at them get repelled as long as their opponents have low morale. Um,
Right.
and because they've got a length 4 with very high attack stat,
Well,
they can repel a lot.
you've got a blood nation, so along with berserking sacreds, if you were to throw these up with what's the name of the fear spell in blood? Why am I drawing a blank here? The hits everybody. Where are we here?
A Rain of Blood.
Rain of Blood. Yeah, you throw something like that up, and you're going to significantly improve their capabilities.
You can do it on a small scale with Agony as well.
Exactly.
But of course, you don't have, because the Death Hags don't have blood battle magic. Again, you don't have the trick you can do there. You do get blood and some other things though, and including
Yeah,
some of the pleasure cult stuff.
you can use the pleasure cultists, and I also really liked this is a comment. This is one of my favorite things is when you tag a +2 for a random. It makes the random so much more useful.
People absolutely love those. They go they go wild. I think there's only a very small number of them in the base game.
Well,
People absolutely love them.
Illwinter has started to move a little more towards it, but on the other hand, then they built Erythia, which has a whole bunch of unattached 100% singles. So their Deducos end up with possible 5 single pass, or you have to buy so many to get the combos you need. And it makes it a weird nation. I found Erythia to be one of the strangest nation designs that Christopher's ever put together. It sort of breaks a whole bunch of his standard tropes that he's stuck with throughout the history. But he's pushing the envelope more and more lately, and I think he's getting that from some ideas of looking at you modders.
I think that there's a bit of influence from that, and I also think, as you say, it's more of a kind of recent in a kind of as a relative term here. But if you look at the nations from Dominions 3 onwards, where there were nations being added on top of the ones that came in the base game as free updates, which is one of the great things about Dominions.
Absolutely.
I remember almost every single one of them when it came out had something that was quite different. There's a few that are more similar to some of the others. They tend to be the ones that came into iterations, though, like in Dominions 4, the base game nations. But if you think back as far as like when Lanka was added, they're usually quite different. They're quite an interesting spin on an existing thing.
And that's a good point. So Christopher is always kind of, like, to the best of my knowledge, all of the nation development and lore and art is Christopher, and Johan does code.
Yeah, other than Ogarus, which was done by Gabby, I think.
That was the intern. The intern, yeah. And then the event system was done by Random Events in Dominions 4. I don't remember his real name, but here's a funny little tidbit. Just 2 days ago, somebody made a little comment. Hey, is that Donald Allen in the credits? You? And I know you're in the credits somewhere, but whether or not you want to advertise that is your choice.
Yeah, I think I'm in the credits of all of them. I don't remember, but not Dominions 1 or 2. But I think I might be in 3, 4, and 5.
So there was a funny little, and I said, yeah, totally. But I also said that, I mean, I put my YouTube in my personal name some years ago due to some things I learned. Like, everybody already knew who I was, so what does it matter?
Yeah.
Okay.
So perhaps we should, if we, I'm not sure how kind
host a few.
Yeah, if we host a few, but the important thing is just to get a few. If you can get like a male and a female pleasure cultist in the places where you want to get these.
Yeah, here he is. Here's the male guy. So I'll start him heading that way. And can we buy pleasure cultists now here? Well, we could just buy one here, which would go quicker.
Yeah, just purchase them.
And this guy I'll have search.
There's definitely diminishing returns, but I think it cares about the first male cultist, the first female cultist, and then maybe a second male and a second female cultist in terms of increasing the chances. But it definitely doesn't go beyond that. Okay,
so 2 of each is sort of would be, 1 of each is great, but you do want each of the genders.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's useful to know.
And obviously all of them are helping in the sense that they're keeping the Dominion low.
Right, and after we talked, it was fairly obvious. I believe these are the slaves you mentioned these guys are above average for recruitable troops.
They're actually pretty great, yeah. The Marauder War Slave, particularly that one. And there's also the Shielded Marauder is quite good too. He's
this guy here?
No, he's just whatever. That guy, yeah.
Although this one's crippled, so I won't worry about him.
Yeah, but so he doesn't have any armor is his problem, but they do still hit very hard. Well, he's less good because the Spike Club not being very good, but
right, not the same guy. Yeah,
it's mostly the two weapon war slaves.
I'm quite pleased that your sprites are fairly distinctive. You've done a good job of making them. I know that sometimes it's really difficult when I was playing Lanka when you're trying to split the various long dead, because so many, and I just detest the fact that the soulless look almost identical to the long dead for Lanka when you reanimate, but soulless are undisciplined and long dead are disciplined. You definitely don't want to mix them.
Yeah.
So I find it easy to separate out the various flavors of the slaves.
I have had some feedback that a thing that I do, which is not really a thing that happens in the base game, except with kind of cross-breeding spells, is I'll have some unit you recruit, or slaves in this case. I'll have quite a variety of them because I like them to have like a variety of equipment. That does annoy some people because a lot of people are used to double clicking to select like if you need to separate out of the orcs and goblins from the humans to separate out the disciplined and undisciplined slaves, you've got to do a little bit more clicking because you can't just double click and get all of that particular type. But I think that's partly just that people's habit is to double click to select groups of troops. Of course, you can kind of do the click, shift, click.
You can do the shift and click.
To get
my only complaint is a few patches back, Johan reduced the size of the accuracy of the mouse hover, so it's very easy to not quite click on them, which drives me a little bonkers sometimes. And I have a big monitor. I don't know how the heck you handle this on a little laptop.
You just go slowly,
slowly
and carefully, and play nations that don't have lots of free spawn or anything like that, I think.
Well, I have to say, that brings up a point that I sometimes make when I'm talking to new players. If you don't like micro, don't play micro-intensive nations. Don't play blood magic, and don't play astral magic, and don't play free spawn nations.
Isn't it interesting, though, that new players almost always gravitate towards those? Because there is something fundamentally kind of stirring in the mind of someone who's new to Dominions when they find out about things like Ashen Empire or just like that. It really is a very evocative thing to have these tides of undead rolling over the world, or tides of demons that you're summoning up.
Yeah, it seems to drive some people. It never did me. I don't ever remember finding that more appealing. I'm much more likely to have the appeal of a nation with a very distinct, interesting theme. So Rillier or Bandar Log or I'm much more likely to want a theme or a lore that sort of pulls me into an alternate universe.
The thing that I absolutely love about Dominions is that it is a different game to so many different people. It's important to them in a bunch of different ways. There's people who like the mythology and they're really into kind of, oh, that's interesting, this is based on this particular bit of Slavic mythology or Greek mythology. There's people who are really into the competitive strategy. There's people who really like the kind of emergent stories that come out as you're playing the game, because you can get quite attached to your particular wizards and commanders and things. And of course, there's people like me. I like the modding. That's why I play Dominions. If it didn't have any modding, I would not play it anywhere near as much.
Right.
Yeah, it's can kind of suit a lot of different interests and tastes.
I agree with you there, and I think that's a strength of the game. I tend to like, playing this game competitively, but then one of my favorite activities in this game is teaching and coaching, which is how I got into writing guides. And then somebody came along and said, well, I like your written guides, but would you put them on video for me? Because that's what I like. I said, well, I'll try, because I had no idea how that would work. And it turned out quite satisfactory.
Yeah.
I mean, real life got in the way more than a few times, but you know about that.
If you enjoy making the content, people generally speaking will enjoy consuming the content. That is an almost universal truth.
I think those go hand in hand.
Enthusiasm is just infectious to people, I think.
It's infectious. That's a great way to put it. Yeah. All right.
And I hope people are enjoying us rambling.
Well, I think we're doing very well. I think this is more than a ramble. I think we've covered enough. I'm just doing a quick check where everybody's at. Sorry, I have a hard time rushing turns because I'm a little bit anal.
That's fine.
I'm not outrageously so, but I do tend to be a little bit. And I have kept recruiting. I don't need troops right now, and I do need gold for infrastructure.
This is absolutely a habit I see amongst players. You can't resist because you know that you're limited on the number of sacreds you can get a turn.
Anytime it's a capital only sacred. Well,
Yeah.
they're not capital only, but
They're not cap only, no. Which,
but
yeah,
you're
I
going to
think
want them someday.
it's true, and they're fantastic. Like if this was in a multiplayer game, they're a fantastic thing to have a little stockpile of.
Here's a
Because
funny.
obviously they got halved upkeep.
I'm having a hard time figuring out what's going on here. Do you see the unrest there?
Yeah, that's got to be a hidden site, right? Is that you've searched death. It could be blood. No,
There's
yeah, there's a
arena.
blood site.
An arena could do it. So we're searching that now, and there's I think a
Brigand's Ruin
and a brigand's lair. Yeah.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll find it here right away. That is a Beastmaster. So she's happy enough to stay where she is.
How have you been finding the Beastmasters? Are you finding them to be
Well, they're a good commander.
Useful.
Well, they're an excellent commander. Leadership 90 with Beastmaster and Taskmaster, and then you get a few animals along the way. So I think they're very.
I'll have to look at the animal spawn rates. It's something I have to be very careful about. Is obviously free spawn because it can become quite overwhelming. But of course, it's naturally limited because you can only get one set of spawns per province. So there's no point in stacking them.
Well, there hasn't been a huge
an
amount of animals, but the attrition on them's been fairly high because I haven't been exceptionally careful to keep them alive.
Oh well, I mean, there's rarely a great reason to.
No,
although they have no upkeep, which is obviously one benefit that you can kind of stockpile them a little bit. But
well,
they're still paying upkeep on the Beastmasters.
Oh, here's the thing I noted. When I took this water province, there was no enslavement event. I assume that's because it's water.
Yep, it's intentional.
Oh, well, that didn't.
Warhammer World is not super into underwater combat and things, so Dark Elves don't enslave people underwater.
Well, mermen are one of the worst independent water troops you can buy, so I'm not surprised that failed. But there's enough of them still alive around to finish that off. Because I only left 7 down there.
They do sometimes overperform by managing to nip something with a bit of poison damage and just get a couple of little chip damage bits in there, and they'll poison something valuable. But it's more of a thing with the horror armor.
They're pretty flimsy. So, see, I don't know. So I've got 228 gold. So not a heck of a lot of reason to. Mostly, I'm just going to finish up infrastructure. She's going to do a search now. Oh, I see. I haven't built the fort up enough. It's 2 turns to get this first male pleasure cultist. This guy didn't find anything, so he can... In order for him to... Realistically, I had candles turned on before, so I'll turn them... Oh, they are on. So
you've managed to heretic that one down, I guess.
Well, then I guess you might as well head back. And we probably
you have the first site there of the pleasure cult. It hasn't given you an event because it's the very beginnings.
Okay. Oh, neat. So it started.
It has started, and the lore there is that's how it starts. It's just kind of gatherings of dark elf aristocracy. They're kind of drinking wines, doing sadistic games with slaves and things, and generally being a bit too decadent beyond the normal levels of the Dark Elves.
And obviously, I got too many Beastmasters all in one place, so I'll spread them out.
Spread them out.
Okay, I'm still making more mermen. Oh yeah. They're going to have a hard time taking these heavy Tritons.
So Triton guards. Yeah. Anything with shields underwater tends to be
I should have looked to see. Oh, I've got the dagger ones. They're pretty bad. Not much point. Anyways, I'm not really trying to make a water play. It was just a bit of a sideline. And this, I've got 2 pleasure cults started. So that mechanic is starting to get going. Well, I did not find a blood site here.
I'm really not sure.
Yeah, it might be a nature site. That's the other significant unrest causing path that I'm aware of.
So the pleasure cults themselves do cause some unrest, but that's only just kicked off. So the unrest that's there is not caused by them.
Do they?
The cultists don't, but the cult itself, the event making the sites and things, does cause a little bit of unrest.
But this
because
unrest
people are,
was almost at 100 before I even built the fort.
yeah,
So,
it was already there.
so it,
I guess just put it down.
yeah. Okay.
You do have some
great.
very good patrollers.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm gonna have to just put us on pause for a second, and I'm just gonna deal with my phone.
No problem.
Talk to her later. Okay. I don't know why I still have my phone set to that crazy antique car horn thing. It scares the crap out of me if it rings at night. It sounds like some kind of a fire alarm or something. I should really change that. Ooga. Oh,
Something a bit more peaceful, maybe.
yeah. Oh, dire wolves. Oh. So I wonder if somebody claimed a throne. Do we see a throne claim? Because dire wolves...
I don't think you have thrones turned on, so...
Oh, I
it's
didn't
probably,
know. For simplicity's sake, rather than muck about with thrones, I just set it to domination. I found a magic site. Okay. Another Corsair. Okay, another cove. Good.
So where's Endron?
It should be here. Mm-hmm.
Alright, yeah. So this map would actually be... So the Dark Elves have automatic coastal start, if they're able to, on the map.
Mm-hmm.
And then this map is fantastic for coasts and things with sailing. It's like absolute bonanza.
But I've got to stagger them too distant from forts. So that's...
Yeah, if they're adjacent to a fort, they'll get removed almost immediately.
Oh.
And I think it might be immediately.
It should have occurred to me that this guy's not actually doing his job anymore. This province here, 25, is probably not a coast. It's looking like...
Probably not.
That's just a river. And I could try for the barbarians, but I'd have to bring some of these other armies up. I decided to put a fort up here.
Mm-hmm. If this were a multiplayer game, you might, because he's got sailing, he's got pretty big distance on him. I don't know all of the places he can reach, that one Corsair captain, but
well, normal sailing is any province adjacent to the closest two water provinces.
Yeah, so if you select him,
he should be able to sail here.
Yep.
I thought he would be able to go there.
Oh. I think it's a map setting as well, how far you're allowed to sail.
Could be. Yeah, he's only getting provinces that are adjacent to this water province.
Yeah, it's still pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, you can... Obviously, you don't know what's over there, but if it were a multiplayer game and you wanted to... if you were happy to potentially annoy somebody, you could be hitting them with it.
Well, I think the thing is, I don't have very many other coastal provinces. Now that there's a Corsair Cove here, I could go up in this area and try to establish coves. So that would be a good place for this guy.
Possibly the one that's next to the bridge, just to the south of where he is currently.
This one here?
No, on the kind of bottom right of the screen, the furthest bottom right province.
Oh, down there.
Yeah, I think that might be coastal because it's got the line going to the...
It does, but I'm putting up a palisades right here.
Oh, okay, yeah.
In 18, so...
It would get disappeared even if it appeared.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. So this Corsair, it would take longer to move him than just to have him stick around. He's not doing a whole heck of a lot else.
He's potentially scaring Jotun off. But,
yeah. That's probably enough for the time being. Okay, so I'm coming up to an hour, and I've been fairly happy to keep these at about an hour. Do you have... We can do another one of these. I'll maybe work some more on my own. Do you have any final comments? Any other suggestions?
So, anyone watching, if you want to give the Dark Elves a go, I recommend them. But then again, I did make them. I have various other mods that you might want to try out. And if you use any of the Discord or... yeah, I mean, pretty much the Discord is the best place to find me, and I'm always happy to talk about Dominions or help you out if you want to do any modding yourself. Yeah, I think in a lot of games there's kind of a barrier of thinking, oh, I don't want to use mods because they're a bit complicated or maybe they're a bit buggy or something. Doesn't tend to be the case with Dominions. They're real simple to install, so give them a
Oh, the
go.
installation is very simple, and I will put up a fresh link to your profile because that's the easiest place to find all your mods on Dominion's
Yeah,
blog.
I have a post on the Dominions mods
Hmm.
forum, which has got the combination mod that's got all the Warhammer. There's 16 Warhammer nations in there, and then you can get them individually as well because
Yeah,
you've got the choice.
exactly. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Sombre.
No problem. Happy to talk Dominions.
We will do some more of this. I'm definitely thinking I'm going to now look at one of your other mods before I do too much more with this one, just to make more of a broad appeal rather than a detailed, narrow appeal. And I'll sort of wait around, see what kind of questions come up from other people.
Cool.
All right. Thanks, everybody. This should be up tomorrow. It's the 28th of June, and I should be posting this tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye now.